I was halfway through a routine training drill when my phone buzzed. Morgan's name flashed on the screen. Rare, given she hated calling me during the day. It wasn't a voice note or a text. It was an image. I opened it. Emma stood in our living room, holding a poster covered in bright scribbles. At first glance, it looked like a kid's art project. But my eyes, trained to pick up details others miss, locked on one word written in shaky block letters beneath the colors. Help. The letters were too intentional to be random. Emma was 6, old enough to know what that meant, young enough to risk everything by trying to say it, and Morgan had sent it without realizing what was on the paper. My pulse didn't spike. My breathing didn't change. Years in the Rangers had taught me to move fast without looking like it. I put my phone away, excused myself from the drill, and headed for the comms office. Within minutes, I was on a secure call with my sister Dana. She'd always had a read on people, and she'd never liked Morgan. I need you at my house tonight, I said, skipping any warm-up. What's wrong? Emma sent me a message she couldn't say out loud. What kind of message? One word, help. There was a pause, then Dana's tone hardened. I'll come up with an excuse. You'll have my update in a few hours. I spent the rest of the day counting seconds. By evening, Dana's voice came back over the line, low, clipped, and certain. She's nervous, defensive, phone blowing up with messages she hides. Emma's clingy, keeps trying to tell me something Morgan cuts off. And the kid, she asked me if you're dead. Someone's been feeding her garbage. That was enough. I filed for emergency leave under family crisis. My CO didn't ask questions. By the next evening, I was back in the States, but I didn't go home. I checked into a motel 2 towns over. Dana met me there with a file thick enough to make my stomach turn. Photos, dates, a name, Ryan Lark, pharmaceutical rep. Never married. Lifestyle far above his reported income. He's been in your house, Dana said, multiple times while you were gone. Morgan leaves Emma with sitters to see him. The girl's having nightmares and wetting the bed. You want the worst part? I nodded. Ryan's been investigated before for sniffing around military families. Nothing stuck, but the pattern's there. And if what I think is true, Morgan's told him things she shouldn't. That changed everything. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a breach. 3 days. That's how long I spent watching my own home from a distance. Patterns emerge fast. Ryan arriving at night, Morgan disappearing for errands, Emma retreating into her room when he was around. She'd been trained to stay away. It was all routine to them, like I'd been erased. The deeper I looked, the darker it got. Morgan had accessed my accounts, sent Ryan details about my deployments, even asked about the terms of my life insurance. The implication was obvious. Most men faced with this would storm through the door and start shouting. That's not how you win a war. You win by making the enemy believe they're safe until they're not. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. First, I'd know every move they made, every word they said. I'd build something they couldn't escape from. Not a punch, not a threat, but a complete collapse. And when it happened, they'd understand 2 things. 1, I'd seen everything. 2, I wasn't the man they thought I was. The clock had started. The first step was getting inside Ryan's world without him knowing it. His condo's security was laughable. An old keypad lock with a code easy to pick up from worn buttons. One night while he was out, I let myself in. I didn't take anything. I left a small device the size of a coin wedged into the back of his laptop. Keylogger, GPS tracker, access to everything he typed or sent. I was gone in under 5 minutes. Within days, I was reading his messages in real time. Most were to Morgan, enough to make my teeth clench, but I pushed past the personal. I wanted intel, and then I found it. Long threads where he asked about my unit, our security, my next deployment. Morgan answered, sometimes in detail. She'd crossed a line. So had he. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was information someone could sell, and Ryan was already fishing for a buyer. While I built my digital case, I started squeezing them offline. Small moves at first. I'd trigger Morgan's home alarm in the middle of the night, leave her mailbox ajar, call the landline and hang up when she answered. The goal wasn't to scare her, not yet. It was to create static, tension between her and Ryan. And it worked. The keylogger caught him accusing her of being sloppy. She shot back that he was paranoid. Cracks formed. On a Thursday night, I followed Morgan's car into the city. She parked 3 blocks from Ryan's condo and walked the rest of the way. I waited until she was inside, then slid a plain envelope under his door. Inside, a single photo of the two of them from 3 weeks earlier, taken from a rooftop across the street. No note, no signature. By midnight, the keylogger lit up with frantic messages. Who's watching us? Did you tell anyone? Ryan blaming her, Morgan blaming him. I stayed patient. Pressure too fast breaks the wrong way. I needed them turning on each other, not banding together. The next phase was financial. Using access to Ryan's accounts, I funneled select details to an old contact in federal investigations. Not enough to trigger arrests, just enough to put him under routine audit status. His assets froze within days. He told Morgan he was dealing with a misunderstanding. She told him she didn't sign up for this. The cracks widened. By now, Emma was spending more time with Dana. She didn't ask why. Kids know when they're safer in one place than another. Dana kept her busy, kept her smiling, while I tightened the net. The keylogger gave me the final piece. Ryan drafting and outlined to sell the information he'd taken from Morgan to a foreign contact. He used her as his source, but in the file he called her unreliable and suggested cutting her out once the deal was done. Perfect. I took screenshots, every word. Then I staged the last push. I left another envelope at Ryan's, this time with bank statements showing his frozen accounts and a forged internal memo suggesting Morgan had been talking to investigators. The meltdown was instant. The messages turned ugly. Ryan accusing her of betrayal, Morgan accusing him of using her, both convinced the other was the leak. By the end of the week, they weren't meeting in person. Every word was through text, and every text dripped with paranoia. I had what I needed: evidence of espionage, conspiracy, and mutual distrust. All that was left was to let them implode. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to throw a punch. I just needed to be patient, because when they finally realized what was about to hit them, there'd be no way out. I picked a Saturday, no school for Emma, which meant Dana could take her out early and keep her away from the house. No surprises, no collisions, clean edges. By dawn, I'd sent 3 packets, one to my CO with a summary of Ryan's data harvest, one to federal contacts with the screenshots and timestamps, and one to child services outlining Emma's statements and Morgan's absences. Facts only. No commentary. I didn't need to sell the story. The receipts did it for me. The plan was simple. Let the truth arrive before I did. At 8 sharp, 2 unmarked sedans rolled past my street cam and parked a block down. 10 minutes later, a plain van took position near the corner. I stayed off-site and waited for the ping confirming they'd received the warrants. When it came through, I drove home for the first time in months. Morgan and Ryan had chosen the worst possible night for a celebration. Wine glasses on the counter, phone on the table, buzzing with messages that got shorter as his money issues got bigger. I didn't move anything. I set a neat pile of printed screenshots on the kitchen island, his draft to sell my unit's movements, her texts supplying details, their argument threads blaming each other. On top, I placed a short note. This is what you did. I rang the doorbell and stepped back so the peephole got a clear view. Locks clicked. The door opened a few inches. Morgan froze when she saw me. She tried for a smile that died halfway. "You're early," she said. "Earlier than you'd like," I answered. "Where's Emma?" "With Dana," she said. "Since last night." "Good," I said, and walked past her. Ryan appeared from the hallway trying to look calm and landing somewhere between annoyed and scared. He opened his mouth. I raised a hand and pointed to the papers. "Read." They skimmed the first page fast, then slower, then stopped talking altogether. When they hit the part where he called her unreliable and planned to cut her out, she turned on him. When she reached her own messages describing my work routine, she went quiet, like the oxygen had changed. "This is illegal," Ryan muttered, meaning the way I'd collected it. "What you did is illegal," I said. "What I did is evidence." He tried the move I knew he'd try. Threats about lawyers, about defamation, about harassment. I pointed to the second stack of papers, the formal notices from the agencies I'd alerted. You can explain it to them, I said. They're on their way. The first knock wasn't mine. Two agents with badges, calm voices, clear instructions. Ryan went defensive instantly, asking for someone higher up, as if volume could rewrite the screen grabs. Morgan started bargaining with no one in particular. If she helps, will this go away? No, it won't. I answered only when asked. I confirmed my identity, handed over the original drives, and stepped aside. This wasn't my arrest to make. My job was done the moment the warrants touched the table. They separated Ryan and Morgan for questions. From the hallway, I could hear two different strategies collapsing. He blamed her. She blamed him. Both claimed they never meant harm. The documents answered every denial. When they led Ryan out, he avoided my eyes. When they asked Morgan to come with them for formal statements, she finally looked at me. Please, she said, we can fix this. We can't, I said, but Emma can heal if we stop here. The door closed behind them. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. I sat at the kitchen table and breathed like a man finishing a long run. Steady, controlled, present. No victory high, just completion. Dana texted a single question mark. I called her. It's over, I said. Clean? Clean. She didn't ask for details. She never does. I'll keep Emma until the evening. Don't rush. I spent the next hours on logistics, formal statements, custody filings, a call to a therapist who specialized in children after family crises. I scheduled locks to be changed and canceled Morgan's access codes. I moved through tasks like clearing a checklist on a bad weather jump. No improvising, no shortcuts. By late afternoon, the agents called with an update. The evidence matched the warrants. More interviews were scheduled. Charges were likely. I thanked them and asked for victim liaison info so Emma would have one point of contact if anything bled into her world. They agreed. When Dana pulled up, Emma ran to me like she'd trained for it. I lifted her and felt the kind of weight that doesn't strain the arms. Relief, not mass. You're home, she said. For good, I answered. We skipped explanations and went straight to ground rules. No more locked doors when she's scared. No more adults in the house she doesn't know. Questions answered honestly, age-appropriate, every time. She nodded like a soldier accepting orders, and then leaned into my shoulder until her breathing evened out. That night after she fell asleep, I wrote one final statement. Not for the agents, for myself. I wrote that anger had never once improved an outcome in my life. Only clarity had. I wrote that accountability isn't revenge. It's how you keep tomorrow safer than today. I wrote that I would not make the mistake of letting rage raise my daughter. In the morning, Morgan called from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry. She said she was scared. She said she'd made mistakes. I saved the message. Not to use it. To remind myself that my next choices couldn't be about punishing the past. They had to be about building a future Emma could trust. I brewed coffee, packed Emma's lunch, and practiced the most radical habit I could think of. A normal day. Justice would move at its own pace now. Court dates, hearings, consequences. That belonged to the system, as it should. My mission had shifted. Protect, provide, tell the truth, and never let silence become a message a child has to write for help. The net was closed. The damage stopped where it needed to stop. And for the first time in months, I wasn't watching for threats. I was watching my daughter draw a new poster at the table. This one said home. The first court date arrived faster than sleep. Subpoenas, interviews, recorded calls. Paper turned into momentum. I wasn't there to win a scene. I was there to secure a life. My attorney kept me inside the lines. I answered what mattered, left out what didn't, and redirected anything that tried to pull me into old arguments. Emma's therapist met with us twice a week. No jargon, just tools. We practiced naming feelings before they turned into storms. When she had questions about Morgan, I gave short, honest answers. Adults made choices that weren't safe. The court will make rules to keep you safe. She didn't push. She watched my face, saw I meant it, and let it drop. Federal investigators dug into Ryan's files. My screenshots matched their pulls. His drafts weren't drafts at all. He'd already pitched the data once, got interest, and was lining up another contact. Morgan's part lived in the message history. Times, routines, coded hints that only look innocent if you squint. She tried to reframe it as venting. The timestamps made that impossible. A month in, the DA floated a plea. Ryan would admit to attempted trafficking of sensitive information and conspiracy. Morgan would plead to conspiracy and endangerment. No trials, no fireworks, just consequences. I signed victim impact statements without adjectives. I wrote about stress on a child. I wrote about alarms at 2 a.m. I wrote about sitting in a kitchen counting breaths because anger wanted to be the one to speak. The custody hearing was the only room where I felt the floor shift. Family court isn't about punishment, it's about risk. Morgan's lawyer asked for monitored visitation. Mine asked for a pause until therapy benchmarks were met and criminal proceedings settled. The judge looked at the reports, then at me. "Do you want reunification?" the judge asked. "I want safety," I said. "If she can be safe with contact later, the professionals will say so. Until then, we move slow." The order came down. Sole legal and physical custody to me. Therapeutic visitation suspended pending review. No third-party contact around Emma. No unsupervised communication. Clear rules, no ambiguity. I filled the space with structure, school drop-offs, work on base, now stateside, dinner at the table, phones away. Nighttime check-ins where Emma could say if a thought was heavy. We made a chart for hard days and put a star on any day she felt brave. She liked earning stars more than talking about why. Morgan called once through her attorney, requesting a letter from me that might soften her sentence. I wrote one sentence. Our child deserves stability and accountability from the adults in her life. It said everything it needed to. Ryan tried to reach me through a mutual contact with an apology wrapped in excuses. I didn't answer. I sent the attempt to the agents and blocked the route. People like him believe they can negotiate gravity. When sentencing came, I sat in the back. I didn't look for their eyes. I listened to the record. The judge read the facts the way a metronome keeps time. Steady, unavoidable. Years were assigned. Conditions set. Supervised release terms for later. Restitution for services Emma would need. No drama, just a ledger closing. Outside, reporters asked for a statement. I said, "The system worked. My daughter is safe." That was the last interview I gave. The weeks after felt strange because nothing jumped from the shadows. Quiet takes practice. I took Emma hiking on weekends. She liked counting steps to the top and naming the insects she saw along the way. We built a routine where bedtime didn't mean locked doors. It meant a light left on and a promise that I'd be in the next room. Her nightmares thinned out, then spaced apart, then stopped. The day she slept through the night, she woke up proud, like she'd passed a test only she knew was happening. Dana kept orbiting. She never asked if I was okay. She asked what was next. It was the better question. I started teaching a new cohort, instruction instead of deployment. I relearned weekends. I signed up for a parent volunteer slot at school and didn't stare at the exit. One afternoon, the therapist asked if I'd written anything for myself that wasn't a report. I hadn't, so I did. I wrote a list of lines I wouldn't cross. No surveillance unless there's a safety reason. No revenge disguised as closure. No telling the story for claps. If the past comes up, tell it plain and move on. Morgan sent a letter through the court. It was careful. She said she was working through a program. She said she wanted Emma to know she loved her. I gave the letter to the therapist and asked for guidance. We agreed to hold it. Love isn't an exemption from consequence. It's supposed to be the reason you don't create them. On the 90-day review, the judge asked for updates. The therapist's report was short. Emma's functioning improved with structure and predictability. No signs of ongoing distress in the home. Recommendation, maintain current plan. The order stayed in place. People asked quietly if I felt satisfied. Satisfaction doesn't describe it. Satisfaction is for goals. This was about boundaries that finally held. About a child who didn't have to signal for rescue from her own kitchen. If there's a word, it's steadiness. The last piece I closed was the house. Not with paint or furniture, but with the simple act of owning the space again. I swapped codes, set new routines, put the files in a safe, and created a rule that nothing secret gets to live here. Emma helped tape a list to the fridge. Tell the truth. Ask for help. No strangers. We high-fived like teammates and got on with dinner. At night when the house settled, I'd think about how close I came to choosing fury over process. The story would have been flashier, but the ending would have been worse. What I did instead cost me sleep and pride and the urge to strike back. It gave us something better, a life that doesn't need lookout shifts. I don't celebrate what happened. I honor what stopped. And I keep one promise that governs the rest. My daughter will never have to ask for help in code again. 6 months out, life moved on a schedule that didn't flinch. School mornings, my shift at the training center, homework at the table, lights out at 9. The court calendar kept its own rhythm, status checks, compliance reports, nothing dramatic. Ryan's appeal was denied on the papers. Morgan's program updates arrived through her attorney with stamped signatures and no commentary. I read them, filed them, and went back to dishes and spelling tests. Emma asked about the letter again. We brought it to therapy and set rules. The clinician would read it first, pull what was safe, and we would stop if Emma said stop. The letter said love, regret, and promises to change. No excuses, no blame. Emma listened until she reached her line. I wish I could take it back, and nodded that she was done. On the drive home, she asked if wishing fixes things. I said it doesn't, but doing sometimes does. She stared out the window and said, doing starts with not lying. We let the car be quiet after that. At school, adults learned enough of our story to be curious. A PTA chair asked if I'd speak at an event about resilience. I passed. Resilience is for classrooms. My daughter needs privacy more than applause. Instead, I offered to stock the counseling office with supplies and cover costs for kids who needed outside sessions. I wrote the check, used no names, and walked away. The internet tried to make us a headline. A blogger messaged from a throwaway account, offering a chance to control the narrative. I sent the note to my attorney, then to the agents, then blocked the route. A week later, a video popped up with wrong dates and invented dialogue. We filed takedowns and moved on. Emma doesn't have social accounts. I keep mine locked. Not hiding, guarding. On the 90-day review, the judge kept the orders intact. Therapeutic visitation would be reconsidered only when Emma's clinician recommended it. Emma heard the update in pieces, kid-sized. She asked if she had to decide anything. I said no. The grown-ups make the rules. She gets to tell us how she feels. She relaxed like someone had taken a backpack off her shoulders. Triggers still showed up without warning. A blocked call, a car that looked like Ryan's, a substitute teacher using my last name and asking if Emma's mom would chaperone. Each time we used the same steps. Name it, breathe, choose a next action. Sometimes that action was leaving a room. Sometimes it was staying and proving we could. Progress wasn't a curve. It was a ledger with more good days than bad. Restitution hit my account. Money earmarked for therapy and costs tied to the case. I moved it to a separate fund and added my own deposit. We used it for sessions, then for a weekend program Emma wanted that taught kids how to camp safely. The rest stayed put. I told Emma it was a jar for health and plans, not for stuff. She liked the idea of a jar that couldn't be raided by surprise. Dana stayed close without crowding. She taught Emma how to ride a bike on a quiet street, jogging beside her until momentum took over. When Emma wobbled, she didn't look back at me. She corrected and kept going. That image lasted longer than any court order. Work settled into a role I could live with. I trained recruits who reminded me of a younger version of myself, eager, untested, convinced they were unbreakable. I taught them the boring skills that keep people alive: checklists, redundancy, the discipline to follow a plan when adrenaline shouts for shortcuts. I never used my story as an example. I used the lesson anyway. Morgan's attorney asked for a video call between her and Emma, supervised by the clinician, 10 minutes max. The therapist said not yet. Emma didn't argue. She colored a picture of a tree and said maybe later. Maybe later is a victory when never used to be the only safe answer. One night the power flickered and the alarm chirped in the dark. Months ago that sound would have launched me into a sweep. This time I checked the breaker, reset the panel, and texted Dana a routine all clear. Emma padded into the kitchen and asked if we were fine. I said yes and meant it. We had cocoa, watched the digits on the microwave blink back to life, and went to bed on time. Ordinary is the opposite of crisis. On the 1-year mark, I took Emma to a trail we hadn't tried. At the first overlook, she asked if bad things can come back. I said some do, wearing different clothes. That's why we use rules, not moods. She thought about it, then set a rock on a pile someone else had started and said, then we'll build rules higher than the bad things. It wasn't poetry, it was engineering. The last loose end was mine. I'd kept the original printout of the photo with the word Emma had hidden under scribbles. I brought it to therapy and asked if holding on to it helped. The clinician asked what it did for me. I said it kept me sharp. She asked what it cost. I said sleep sometimes. She suggested I replace it with a timeline, a simple document with dates that prove we acted when we needed to. Facts instead of warnings. I scanned the photo, placed the file in the archive, and put the timeline in the safe. I slept that night like a man who had finished a job and wasn't afraid to be off duty. People expect catharsis at the end of stories like this. There isn't one. There's maintenance. There's a kitchen list that says, tell the truth, ask for help, no secrets. There's a kid who trusts adults again because the adults around her earned it every day, not once in a grand gesture. There's a father who chooses the process over the punch, not because he's calm by nature, but because the result is clean and repeatable. That's the long game, not revenge, not victory laps, just a home where the only codes are the ones on the fridge, and the only signals we need are the ones we say out loud. 18 months in, the case shifted from headlines and hearings to calendars and checklists. The prosecutor closed the file with a final memo. Restitution kept funding therapy. Compliance reports came in on schedule. Nothing dramatic. That was the point. Emma's clinician raised the topic I'd been avoiding, a trial contact. 10 minutes, supervised, therapist in the room, camera on, stop word agreed in advance. Not because anyone owed Morgan access, but because Emma deserved not to carry a question into adulthood if the data said she could handle it. We prepared the way we prepare for storms. Board up loose edges, keep exits clear, set criteria for calling it. We wrote the rules on a single sheet. No blame, no questions that push, no promises that tie the child to an adult's plan. The therapist would end the call at the first breach. Emma would control the stop word, not me. The week before, Emma asked if we had to like what happened. I said no. We only have to tell the truth about it. She asked if telling the truth means forgiving. I said it means seeing clearly. Forgiving is a separate choice. She nodded and went back to her homework like we'd just balanced an equation. On the day we arrived early, the clinician checked the tech and reviewed the script. Emma picked the stop word, red light, because it was easy to say fast. We practiced once. She smiled a little at how official it sounded. The screen lit up. Morgan sat in a neutral room with another clinician. No small talk. The therapist opened, set limits, and handed the time to Emma. My daughter said what she'd practiced. I'm safe. I have questions, but I don't want answers today. Morgan said she was working, learning, and taking responsibility. No tears, no bargains. 10 minutes slid by without a breach. At 8 minutes, Emma said red light. The therapist ended the call. Clean. In the hallway, Emma exhaled like she'd put down a heavy bag. That was enough, she said. We went for sandwiches and didn't bring the topic up again until bedtime. She asked if there'd be another call. I said only if she wanted it, and the clinician agreed. She said maybe in a long time. That counted as a win. I kept my own benchmarks. Night sweats gone. No compulsion to recheck locked doors. No urge to stalk a docket or read forms. When intrusive thoughts showed up, I routed them to the same place as false alarms. Acknowledge. Name. Discard. It felt mechanical because it was. Systems beat feelings when the goal is safety. Work gave me a new lane. Building a course on decision-making under stress. I folded in what this year had taught.